Hey, how's it going? Happy New Year! In today's video, we're going over Boruto 2 Blue Vortex chapter 18. I thought the chapter was okay. I'll admit I did like the segments inside of the Leaf Village more than what was going on in the Hidden Sand, but we still have a decent amount of content to talk about. The cover this time around is decent. I like it better than last month's cover by a long shot, and we get to see Matsuri in her full colors. I like the black and pink combination in her clothing, and I think that Ikimoto did a decent job with the art. The chapter this time around is called Only Babble in Your Sleep, which is not necessarily a theme of this chapter, but more so a reference of what's to come. Okay, with that being said, let's dive right into the review. So we open up the chapter with Sumire attempting to enter the same room where we saw her working with Amado back in 2 Blue Vortex chapters 5. To be honest, Sumire feels like a redundant character a lot of the time. She's not particularly interesting, she doesn't add anything to the story, and I hope that changes in the future. I would like to see Kishimoto actually do something cool and interesting with her, but I guess only time will tell. Sumire ends up seeing Kawaki apprehending Amado, which we saw first occur in the end of chapter 17. Sumire shouts out Kawaki's name, like, "Hey, what are you doing? Have you lost your mind?" And Kawaki uses an interesting choice of words. He's totally sane, and that while things may look violent, Amado and him are just having a chat. And clearly he's being sarcastic, but he's definitely unhinged. This honestly reminds me a lot of the scenario from chapter 69 of part 1, where Code managed to apprehend Amado and try to torture him in order to release his latent power. As much as Kawaki hates Code, they're actually more similar than he would care to admit. Kawaki thinks of himself as a hero of this story, but really, he's just become a mirror of the man he hates the most. Kawaki tells Amado that he doesn't care that he's tinkered with his body up till now, however, that ends today, because Kawaki says he's calling the shots from here on. Kawaki then demands Amado to change his settings and boost his offensive capabilities to their maximum efficiency, and that if Amado does not comply, he will kill him. Sumire shouts Kawaki's name in disgust because of the fact that this is not the way of the leaf. This is not the will of fire, and this is not one of the lessons that Naruto tried to instill in him back in part 1. Kawaki then says to look into his eyes and see his killer intent, to show that he's not playing around. And I find it interesting that Kawaki says that he's not crazy earlier in this chapter, but literally in chapter 77 of part 1, Kawaki tells Hinata that only a crazy person would kill his own brother. And he has that same look in his eye as back then. Kawaki's eyes reflect indifference and cruelty. As long as he reaches his goals, he doesn't care who gets hurt in the process. And people to this day believe that someone like this wouldn't destroy the Leaf Village. So Amado recognizes that killer intent within Kawaki's eyes and then proceeds to loosen his neck a little bit more and then proceeds to use his shutdown command that he mentioned back in Boruto part 1. From 2 Blue Vortex chapter 5, it was very obvious that Amado knew all along that Kawaki was not Naruto's biological son, but rather Ishiki's true vessel. It's very difficult to deceive a deceiver. After all, Amado has been working with smokes and mirrors ever since he was first introduced in the series. And then the evidence against Kawaki was ridiculously high. Why would Kawaki be able to use Hikuna Hikona or Daikoku Ten if he was Momoshiki's vessel? Why would he have requirements for ninja tech maintenance for inventions that Amado specifically created? So Amado had to fully accept the fact that his memory was altered because the facts in his mind did not align with what he was actually seeing, which seems to be the key weakness of Kawaki's variation of Ada's omnipotence. If Amado truly believed Boruto was Ishiki's vessel, let's be honest, he would have without a doubt abandoned the village in pursuit of Boruto, or at the very least helped Boruto when he returned 3 years later, neither of which he decided to do. Amado subtly thanks Sumire for showing up and indirectly helping him distract Kawaki. Amado then asks Sumire to help move Kawaki's body to another location. Sumire, in my opinion, is too trusting, but she goes along with Amado's request. I guess it kind of makes sense. They likely worked together closely since Boruto was away from the village, so I guess she knows that he won't do anything weird. So we cut to the next scene as we get to see Team 7 and Team Shinki still attempting to set a trap for Matsuri and Ryu. Araya picks up on Yodo's eagerness to attack Ryu and is clearly worried that she is going to ruin the plan. Sarada also tries to accuse Yodo's behavior, saying that she's just shy to Ryu. Konohamaru continues to sit down with Matsuri elsewhere and tries to validate her feelings in order to gain her trust. He obviously knows that she has feelings for him, and he fully plans on taking advantage of that to take her down. And it takes me back to the last chapter where Boruto asks Koji the probability of his friend's failure. Koji's vague response indicated to me that the chance of failure in this covert mission was a lot higher than we as fans initially thought. And it's clear by 2 decision points from the characters in this chapter how things start to go downhill. Matsuri's feelings being validated by Konohamaru makes her calm down quite a bit, and Matsuri then expresses that she enjoys talking to Konohamaru. She then blushes for the millionth time and proceeds to ask Konohamaru if it's okay if she says his name, but includes chan at the end. Chan in Japanese culture is a term for endearment. It's used for young children, close friends, babies, grandparents, sometimes even female adolescents. It may also be used towards animals, lovers, or youthful women. And chan is a term that is never used for strangers or people one has just met. So it's pretty ironic that that is not the case here. So even though Konohamaru and Matsuri literally just met, she's only been alive for less than a month, she feels as though she's known him pretty much her entire life, which is technically kind of true. But Matsuri using the word chan makes Konohamaru flash back to Moegi, 2 people who actually knew each other basically their entire lives. Their time at the Ninja Academy, then their time as Genin, and finally Konohamaru flashes back to his memory of her in the Boruto era. I get that people find Matsuri cute. Personally though, I don't see it, and I like Moegi better in terms of physical attraction. I mean, after all, she's human and she's not a world-ending threat. So, I mean, I guess that's a no-brainer for me. But anyways, Matsuri catches on to Konohamaru's disturbed face, but Konohamaru plays it off pretty well. Ryu decides to use his weird sand tentacle things to look for clues for Boruto. I guess there's a sensory aspect of his black sand. I'd like to do more research on Shinki's abilities. I mean, it's been a while since I've actually looked into the character, since he's more present in the anime compared to the manga, which I primarily focus on. Ryu immediately notices the bloodlust within Yodo and makes a comment directly to her about it. So thanks to Yodo, Ryu is now suspicious. And I feel like Sarada and Mitsuki really messed up by introducing Ryu to Team Shinki so soon. I feel as though Sarada and Mitsuki should have just hanged around Ryu just a little bit longer, just gain more of his trust. And then when they were ready to attack, then pretty much spring Team Shinki to attack and pretty much jump him, which I initially thought they were going to do. So this is like entirely different. And what makes this even worse is that Yodo has a terrible poker face. It's like you're making it so obvious, and so it's very clear where things are heading at this point. Yodo tells Ryu to not let it bother him, that she always gives people homicidal looks. It's just the way of the shinobi. It's clear Ryu isn't buying it. He's naive to social interactions, yes, but he's not stupid. He obviously didn't sense this in Sarada, Mitsuki, and Araya, 3 people who are also shinobi. Mitsuki, being smart, decides to distract him and gain more intel on what the Shinju's plans are for Boruto. Ryu then explains that the reason why Jura wants Boruto dead from his perspective is because of his knowledge on the Thorn Soul bulbs. So now Team 7 has a lot more context for what's going on. Sarada then asks Ryu to maybe use his Thorn Soul bulb to, lure Boruto out of hiding. And this is actually a pretty smart plan. Unfortunately, with Yodo around, however, this is what makes this plan very volatile. So we cut back to the Leaf Village as Kawaki awakens from his recent shutdown. I honestly could not live as a cyborg if I knew there was a chance of being violated or hacked in this manner. But Amado tells Kawaki not to flip out and that this is just a normal chat between the 2 of them. Amado agrees that the Shinju are indeed a threat and he did not foresee their emergence at all. I also wanted to note that this is a scene where Amado is not shown smoking. This is a subtle message showing us as an audience that he is going to be very transparent here. I do believe Amado does not actually have plans for the Ten Tails, because if he did, he would have never informed the Leaf Village about the Ten Tails' existence. And if Jigen actually didn't show up in the Ten Tails dimension back in part 1 when Sasuke was there, who's to say Sasuke wouldn't have just used Amaterasu to kill the Ten Tails, thus ruining Amado's alleged plan? Amado says that he will modify Kawaki's offensive capabilities to actually be able to stand up against the Shinju. And this is critical, especially after his embarrassing performance against them in Chapter 8 of Two Blue Vortex. But this can only be done on one condition. And then we get to see a tube in the background behind Amado, and it's clear where this is heading. Amado says that the vessel in the tube is not Delta, merely a soulless vessel of a clone Delta body, something in which he hopes Akabe's soul can inhabit. So it's strictly a vessel for resurrecting one's soul. Amado wouldn't need to use Delta's real body or the real Delta, since Amado can actually make multiple copies of this body. I also imagine as a scientist he'd like to analyze Delta's behavior compared to that of the revived Akabe's. And this also parallels back to what Amado told Naruto and the others back in Boruto chapter 75 of part 1. Kawaki only has to do one thing. He simply needs to implant a karma seal on Akabe's new vessel. Akabe's data was added to Kawaki's karma seal, and in theory, this should summon her soul back to the world of the living via the karma shinjutsu. Something Amado couldn't do as a mere mortal, because souls go beyond the reach of what science can replicate. It's something within the domain of gods, hence the title of Boruto chapter 75. Amado says that everything up to now has been for this moment. And then Amado exclaims that this is his life's mission. And I believe him. He's been waiting for this for a very long time. And he has shown a very disturbing level of patience. Amado tells Kawaki to help him and even says please. Kawaki looks away from Amado, almost as if he's actually pondering if he's going to make this decision or not. Amado then tells Kawaki, that's pretty much it. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. Kawaki in chapter 75 pondered and even asked Amado, would reviving Akabe result in her coming back as an Otsutsuki? Amado back then responds and says that he didn't know for sure, but this was his last chance to give his daughter a life. Literally. Kawaki then says in Two Blue Vortex as a reminder, if she comes back and she turns out to be an Otsutsuki, he'll kill it without exception. And this is a doorway into Kawaki's mind. He hates the Otsutsuki so much that they're not even people to him anymore. Kawaki is so prejudiced, he's giving the second Hokage a run for his money. Amado looks at Kawaki very intensely, and it's clear he's trying to downplay the idea of her coming back that way. And then he says, in the unlikely event that this even does happen, that Amado will understand, but he then outright tells Kawaki that he'll do everything in his power to stop him. And I kind of respect him for that. When Naruto heard Amado's plight back in chapter 75, his humanity showed. Naruto had a basic sense of empathy. Kawaki, on the other hand, lacks that same empathy. I get Amado isn't the most trustworthy guy, but Kawaki literally owes everything to Amado. He wouldn't have had his powers, returned to him in the first place without Amado. Powers that he hated initially, but then he contradicts himself later in part 1 saying that he's grateful, that these powers exist again because it helps him achieve his goals. It's very clear. If Akabe comes back, she will become an Otsutsuki. But at the same time, we learned in Boruto chapter 76 of part 1 from Ada what type of person Akabe truly was. Unlike Delta, she was gentle and pretty much a regular person. So if she gets revived with her original personality intact, that means Kawaki is okay with killing an innocent soul just based off of her race alone. Otsutsuki are intelligent beings who are capable of doing right given that they are under a positive guide. And, decent Otsutsuki have emerged. Toneri, Hagoromo, Hamura. But with Kawaki's logic, they just need to be dead just for being them. And Boruto also, he hasn't shown signs of Momoshiki taking over in Two Blue Vortex. So it's ridiculous he has to die as well. It's obvious that Kawaki is in the wrong here. But here's where things get strange. we know that Boruto told Kawaki a few chapters ago to get Amado to talk about releasing his power, but then he says that Amado wants to use Kawaki's karma for his own self-serving purposes. And the term purposes, it's like that implies that he has more than one specific goal. So maybe the idea of reviving Akabe was just phase one of his plan, and he has other stuff in store for the shinobi world. It's just a thought. Kawaki then says that he cannot accept Amado's terms, and Amado is shocked by this. It's like, hey man, like you get what you want, I get what I want. It's simple. But then Kawaki says that powering him up comes first, and Kawaki doesn't want to create someone who might become a new enemy right now. And Kawaki then says that he swears that he'll implant a karma on the clone, but only on the premise that he has the chance to kill her right away if she turns out to be an Otsutsuki. And my God, is this guy a sociopath or what? But he says he's only willing to do this if and only if Kawaki's foes are dealt with first, which I think personally is a very bad deal from Amado's point of view. I mean, Kawaki's really taking a chance of getting killed and screwing Amado over, let's be honest. And Kawaki is arrogant. Sure, he may be able to defeat Code and the weaker Shinju, but Boruto and Jura? Not even close. Boruto would not even purposefully make Kawaki stronger than him without a way to at least beat him. And Kawaki should realize that, but he doesn't. So Amado literally points out what I just said. Kawaki giving up his defensive and recuperative capabilities means that the chances of dying increase greatly, meaning that Amado also loses his goals for the future as well. And yeah, I think that's kind of dumb on Kawaki's part. It's better to balance the three capabilities out to make yourself a more well-rounded fighter. But just him boosting his offense makes him a glass cannon. Perhaps this is a weakness that Boruto will exploit later, especially since their alliance will end after the Shinju are dealt with. Kawaki says he doesn't care about survival, only about the potential to kill his enemies. And that's pretty stupid because potential may not be met if that's the case. Kawaki then says this to Amado: make me an even bigger and badder monster than them. And it's clearly manipulation on Kawaki's part. Like, he's saying make me stronger so I don't lose against them. But the point that he's trying to make really sounds like this: hey Amado, I'll revive your daughter on the premise that you make me an unstoppable force that even you can't oppose someday. Yeah, isn't that a great idea? This is the final parallel to chapter 75, and this is when Amado describes first meeting Jigen. He says that Jigen offered him the opportunity to reunite with Akabe if Amado assisted him. And we know dang well Ishiki was not going to keep his part of the bargain because his intent was to eradicate every single living being on Earth with his divine tree. And that would have happened if he would have won in the story. And it's clear as day as well that history is repeating itself. Amado created Ishiki Jr. or Ishiki 2.0. And I know hearing Kawaki's words really unraveled Amado, because it's like, this is him making a second deal with the devil. And I know he's having deja vu right now. Kawaki says to Amado to use any means to power him up. The Shinju, Code, and Boruto have to die, and only then will he revive Akabe. And he just looks so evil in that panel. Like, oh my goodness. And we know this is a bunch of crap. Like, even Boruto and Koji probably know it's full of crap. And this is probably their way of getting Amado on their side, because Kawaki's betrayal may lead to Amado working with Boruto in the future to take down Kawaki. We cut back to the Hidden Sand Village, and we get to see Matsuri is having the time of her life, saying that this is the best day ever and that she's so happy despite not living, very long. She was recently just born. And she keeps repeating Konohamaru-chan after every sentence. Konohamaru, in a polite manner, even though he's uncomfortable, says to her, like, hey, can you not call me that? And, I get it where he's coming from. I mean, she's a twisted mirror of his best friend and possible love interest. I get it, totally. Matsuri looks concerned and says, like, hey, what's wrong? Konohamaru says that there's only one person that calls him that. And it's clear he's talking about Moegi, and even blushes about it. I mean, he has a special bond with Moegi, and no one can replace her or replicate that bond. And I respect Konohamaru for that. He's a real one. But then, like, literally 2 seconds later, Matsuri gives Konohamaru the death stare. It's very clear she's angry and jealous, and asks, like, who is the person that can be the only one to call him that? And Konohamaru peeps this change in Matsuri's tone and tries to downplay it. It doesn't work, and Matsuri gets even more hostile. She was just recently born again, so I didn't expect her to be able to regulate her emotions very well. Like, these are very brand new emotions to her, so she doesn't know how to comprehend these different aspects of feelings. Now, Koji did talk about risk in the previous chapter, and there's a chance Konohamaru, what he says next, may get him killed, or he says something to calm Matsuri down in the next chapter, but I believe this will all come down to a decision point. Ryu then releases a Thorn Soul bulb, so I guess the Shinju can operate separately from their bulb without it being life-threatening to them. If their bodies are destroyed, then the bulb just needs to be returned to their dimension containing the Divine Tree branches to bring them back to form. My guess is that exposing the bulb to the tree containing the victim of a claw grind permanently kills the Shinju, and that the bulb will dissipate into nothing at that point. And then there's the idea of the bulb rotting out on its own, which is something we haven't seen yet. It's only just been mentioned. Yodo then makes a reckless decision. She decides to go after the Thorn Soul bulb, and effectively she blows everyone's cover. Because Ryu was already suspicious, and she just confirmed his doubts in her narrative. Even though things went bad, there's still good news, because Matsuri and Ryu are still separated from each other. And because of that, Team 7 and Team Shinki still have a fighting chance, so long as Konohamaru can get Matsuri to calm down in the next chapter. Sarada then notices her body moving on its own, and it's clearly Ryu manipulating her body to strike Yodo. And it's not just her. Mitsuki realizes that all of them are affected by Ryu's jutsu, or rather his sand particles, meaning that they are all effectively puppets at Ryu's disposal. But then out of nowhere, Sarada and Yodo get hit with an energy wave, and Ryu is shocked by this. Sarada then realizes that she's back in control of her body, and that the sand was essentially repelled from her system. So we get to see that Araya was the one who actually made this possible with his new weapon, the Lodestone. So the Lodestone is a sand sealing blade. And I can't wait to see the context for how this weapon was created and how specifically did Araya and Shinki use this. And I'm sure we'll get to see that in a flashback in the coming chapter. Araya kind of reminds me of Shino from Naruto Part 2 or Naruto Shippuden, by the way. I just thought I'd put that out there. And I'm glad to see that he's going to be very useful in this fight as well. I hope that this fight gives me like the same vibes as Team 7 versus Boro from Part 1. And I'm very excited for it. Like, I'm glad that the action is finally starting. And alright guys, that's all I got for this video. Until next time.